Greetings, everybody. This is for my U.S. History 2 class, continuing the discussion on a return to normalcy, Concept 4, discussing the Hoover administration and the Great Depression, the beginning of it. There had been signs of weakness in the economy well before 1929. A good part of the productive system depended on the high rate of consumption, yet, as we've pointed out, much of the population suffered from low incomes, so they had very little purchasing power. Furthermore, the speculative boom inflated values and credits and linked prosperity to the future expectations rather than to current realities. The ability to keep business going rested on the faith that the prices would continue to rise. Hoover's attempts to deal with the Depression, the beginning of the Great Depression, beginning in 1929, can be broken down into three phases. Phase 1, Hoover felt the economy was sound, which was a mistake, and just needed confidence. Thus, the government should not interfere with business. He took steps to prevent the spread of the Depression by, in a series of conferences, he tried to persuade business leaders to keep wages and prices up voluntarily. B, business did, but when consumption and trade fell off, they had to lay people off. Second phase, as the Depression got worse, Hoover was determined to keep government small and relief at the local level. The third phase, Hoover endorsed a compromise relief program with the establishment of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, or the RFC. The RFC lent money or gave relief loans and started public work programs. However, it put only $1.2 billion in circulations in 6 months. Not nearly enough capital to restart the economy at this point. As the Depression deepened, the view grew among voters that Hoover was a do-nothing president. So, as Hoover's administration established itself, you had these shanty towns outside of urban areas called Hoovervilles. When people had to fall asleep out in parks, they used newspapers for blankets, and those would be called Hoover blankets. So Hoover early on got a lot of blame for the beginning of the Great Depression. Yet it would be a little bit disingenuous to blame Hoover or to cast Hoover as a do-nothing president. Hoover's administration did more in its attempt to bring about recovery than any previous administration, either Republican or Democratic, in earlier economic depressions. Franklin Roosevelt, in fact, would continue some of Hoover's policies, including the RFC. The problem was that neither Hoover nor anyone else did anything fast enough to reverse the downward spiral from 1929 to 1933. In many cases, Hoover was following what was thought to be the best policies of the time. The problem was just too complex for one administration to reverse course. Hoover's economic philosophy, as well as most of his fellow Republicans and huge sections of the Democratic Party, greatly inhibited his attack on the Depression. His most important inhibition was his conception of the role of the federal government in the economy, which would have been the traditional role of the federal government within the economy. So Hoover, like presidents before, many presidents before, that is, believed that the sole function of the government was to bring about a condition of affairs favorable to the beneficial development of private enterprise. He held tight, however, to the view that the federal government to reform or reorganize the economy, even when the economy obviously did not function well, would inevitably mean a loss of individual freedom. Thus, all Hoover could do was work within his fundamental framework and hope for economic improvement, which as history lays out, it failed to materialize. Hoover firmly believed that direct aid to poverty-stricken people was not a legitimate function of the federal government. All aid to the needy, he maintained, was the responsibility of state and local governments and of private charity. As far as the federal government activities were concerned, Hoover placed a high value on the security of private property than on the welfare of individual human beings. Individual welfare improved only indirectly under Hoover's policy. Hoover believed in trickle-down theory of federal aid. For example, the Hoover administration lent huge amounts of money to banks and railroads on whose condition the welfare of thousands of individuals was partially dependent. Franklin Roosevelt came up with the notion of direct aid at low levels to spur consumption to pull industry out of its slump. So what FDR does is he turns government intervention in on its head. He goes directly towards the common person to aid them. All humanitarian conditions aside, economically, the trickle-down method of federal aid was not effective in combating the Depression as a direct aid to low-income groups would have been, the grassroots approach. The poor, after all, would have spent their aid very quickly, thereby lubricating the economy. So goes the theory of kind of grassroots economics as opposed to trickle-down economics. That's concept 4, looking at the beginning of the Depression and the Hoover administration. Let me know if you have any questions. This concludes the return to normalcy, 1921 to 1933. Next, we'll be looking at the Great Depression. Again, email me if you have any questions and begin to develop this essay. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.